If you want to create more massive racket acceleration on any of your ground strokes, well, guess what? There's really two things to stop most players from doing this. Number one, body rotation. Knowing exactly how to use your body to create more racket speed. Number two, tension. If you have tension, then what you're going to do is, even if you do create a ton of racket speed with your body, you're going to basically shut it off by being too tense. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make sure you're creating enough racketed speed using your body, and then in addition to create that massive amount of racketed speed, I'm going to show you how to release the tension so you can release more massive racketed speed on your forehands and backhands. So let's get started. So like I said, number one thing that crushes people as far as creating massive racketed speed is learning to use their body. If you're wondering if this is you, then I'll give you a couple signals if it is. If you swing and you feel scrunched up like this, then you're not using your body properly. If you don't know how to rotate, it's really this amazing feeling that if you rotate, suddenly it becomes very effortless, or at least you don't have to put that much effort to create a ton of racketed speed. So the very first question you need to be asking yourself is, why is rotation important? Can't I just hit the ball with my arm? Well, yeah, you can, but it's gonna be inefficient and it's gonna probably lead to more injuries. Not only that, it's hard to reproduce the right racket head angle to send the ball in the direction you want because you're muscling. I call this pulling double duty. What double duty really means is your arm is not only trying to create the power, but it's also trying to direct the ball. And if you pull double duty, it means because of all that tension, because you're not using your body, you're gonna have a hard time consistently placing the ball. Another thing you should look at is if you're inconsistent. If you're inconsistent, it's probably because you're pulling double duty or you don't understand the racket face. If you don't understand what the racket face and racket path is used for, go watch this video because I'll explain exactly how you can use your racket face and racket path to be more consistent. But you can't go watch that video until you really know how to use your body, because your body is the engine of your stroke, whether it be your forehand or backhand. And I'm talking one-handed or two-handed. So it's really important to understand how to use your body properly. Since you know now why it's so important, because if you're pulling double duty, you're not gonna be consistent, you're not gonna be able to place the ball where you want. So let's get started. So let's talk about how you should rotate. It's really simple. I'm gonna talk about two different stances so you have everything covered, but you know exactly how to do it, because basically it's the exact same thing for each one. Let's talk about open stance for a second. So in an open stance, what you really wanna do is figure out how we can coil and then uncoil. So I'm gonna put my racket right on the side here. This represents kind of contact, and let's see, I'm not coiled, but if I wanna coil, what I need to do is turn my hips. Now you can see how I pulled my racket away from contact, coiling my body. Now, there's another move in here called the unit turn that'll help you coil, but I'm just gonna focus on the hips right now. So I'm gonna coil my hips, and then you have to ask yourself this question: how do I get my racket head to the contact without moving the racket? See, so many players here turn, yeah, they turn, and then they think, okay, I gotta get my racket to the contact, so this is what they then do. But if you understand about rotation and using your body, what really has to happen after you coil is that you uncoil to bring the racket back around. So if you find yourself hitting the ball like this, then more than likely you're not rotating. Sometimes players will rotate a little bit and then their arm will take over, but we really wanna make sure that we coil and then uncoil. So this is the open stance where we're talking about how we coil to pull the racket away from contact, and then we uncoil to pull the racket back into contact. Now let's talk about a neutral stance where maybe I'm stepping in. Well, guess what? It's the exact same thing, except when you're in a neutral stance, a lot of times what happens is your hips are already back. So if I turn to go move forward or approach the ball, my hip is already back. So really what I need to focus on is how do I turn to pull the racket back into contact. And it's so important to understand this, that when your hand's here, if you focus on turning your hips, that's most of the power right there. Now, if we put this in context for you very technical people out there of the kinetic chain, this is just one portion of it. The kinetic chain is a sequence of how we use our body. And this is so fundamental, because if you get your kinetic chain right, the sequence in how you're using your entire body, then it makes it easier for you to relax and control the racket. So if we put the whole thing in context, this is just one major portion. It's a big muscle. We want to get away from using small muscles like our arm and our wrist to using big muscles in a sequence of using big muscles. So how that will work is basically when I coil, I'm going to do one other action, which is push against the ground. By pushing against the ground now, I'm storing energy in my legs. basically my knees and my calves. So I can now push against that and uncoil, and then start using that uncoil to pull my hips through. That's gonna pull my shoulder through, that if I'm relaxed, it's gonna pull my arm through. And that's how you can create a ton of racketed speed. Look at the difference between working just this arm to do it versus here, I pretty much already got the racket back, and here, I pretty much haven't really moved the racket, and I'm creating a ton of racketed speed. Now, if you're gonna do a neutral stance, it's basically, since I'm already in this position, I need to focus on, again, pushing against the ground and using that force to turn my hip, shoulder, and then hand going through the ball. And that's the sequence you need to understand for the whole kinetic chain, but focusing a little bit more today on just your hip rotation. Because a lot of times when you can focus on your hip rotation, it will solve a lot of the other issues. Now, if you have more issues than that, then we need to go step by step, making sure that we're turning our hips, and then we're bringing our shoulder through, and then we're relaxing our arm, which we're gonna talk about in a second. But before we go do that, I want you to do this really easy drill that'll help you start focusing on more hip rotation. Basically, I want you to go out to the court, or you can do this in your living room, and just get your racket and set it on your hip. And all I want you to do is really sway, okay? Feeling how I'm pushing down against the ground, and I'm pulling my racket through that contact. That's super important that you feel this pushing down and then uncoiling. When you push down, you might even feel a sense of tightness because you're storing energy from the ground, and then you can use that to push through. Once you do this a couple times, where you feel really comfortable that you're not moving the racket and you're just moving your hip, then I want you to take your arm and pull it away from your body. And I want you to take the racket back using your hip and then pull through and finish. You'll notice a lot of times, because I'm uncoiling, you'll start even feeling and experiencing more racketed speed, and if you're relaxed, it'll automatically follow through. Another big signal that you might not be using your body is this. I see players that hit and they like stop, okay? Because basically they hit with their arm and you have that impact with the racket and they tense up and stop. Compared to when you're using your body, a lot of times you see players starting to follow through without me even asking, because they're building up so much momentum with the racket, they let it go through. And this is so important if you want to have massive amounts of racketed speed on your forehand or backhand. Now, let's talk about the backhand. Whether you be a two-handed player or one-handed player, it's the exact same concept. With a two-handed player, I want you to do the exact same drill, and you're just focusing on turning again. And you really can feel how that racket can come around because you're turning. And if you're in a neutral stance, the exact same thing. Feeling that without having my hands go forward, I can pull the racket to contact. Now, this is the one difference for a one-handed player. When you're a one-handed player, you're gonna be in this exact same position, but I want you to think of igniting your one-handed backhand instead of the full rotation. So the ignition is that I'm gonna start and then let everything else flow through. So by starting, and this is the difference between starting and rotating. I wanna start and then send that energy all the way through my arm. And that can only happen if we talk about what we're gonna talk about next, which is being more relaxed. Now, tension, why is tension so bad? Tension's bad because it starts cutting off our natural power we can gain for free. That's right, you can get more acceleration for free. Let me show you how. Well, guess what? This little nice thing called gravity, what happens when the racket, I'm just gonna do it this way, starts leaning forward and I'm relaxed, it falls down naturally. It's gonna pick up speed naturally. Another great way of thinking about this, I think of a roller coaster. What's the first part of a roller coaster? You get in, you get tucked with a seatbelt and harness or whatever, you go up, 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 and you go down this huge hill, which builds up all that momentum going down, and then it continues it going forward. Now, what's the difference between a kiddie roller coaster and a big roller coaster? It's the very first part. The very first part on many roller coasters, you're gonna go up really high. Kiddie roller coaster a little bit, and you don't have as much speed. So what that means is on either stroke, what you're gonna see a lot of professional players doing, which is taking the racket higher, because what they're doing now is relaxing like a roller coaster and letting that racket come down. Now, there's a timing and sequence here. When it comes down, I start to pull, and I'm gonna feel this alignment of now I'm relaxing, I'm pulling my hips, and then I can use the acceleration and then add more acceleration to it without creating tension. And this is the key. Most players, when they're going out there, they're squeezing the racket really tight, and they think that dropping the racket is like this. They're actually taking energy to drop it, compared to if you're relaxed and you're learning to relax and let everything flow, you're gonna have this natural sense of letting the racket flow and build up speed, and then you can add to it by doing your uncoiling in your rotation in your body. But the moment you add tension, and you manipulate the racket to maybe make it go down, guess what? Your muscle is contracting, making the racket not flow. Same thing on the backhand. What do you see the players doing? Taking the racket here because they want to create that flow. And that flow goes with the turn and the drop. The turn and the drop. One-handed backhand, you're seeing the same thing. Racket up, turn and the drop. They want to sync the drop and the turn together. So they're making sure that as they take the racket back and they start this drop and the racket goes down, they start pulling their hips forward to align this already flow and start accelerating it even more. And this is the biggest thing to having massive amounts of racket speed. If you've ever seen a pro in person, they look like they're not trying to hit the ball that hard, but yet they have a ton of racket speed. It's because of this combination of gravity and using their body and being relaxed. Now, let's talk about being relaxed. A great drill for being relaxed is what I call the 3-finger drill. You take your 3 fingers right here and you hold the bottom of the racket right here. So I'm holding 1, 2, 3 right here. My 2 fingers are off. Now, what this does is basically it makes it really hard. Even if I squeeze here, I can probably make the racket start going, but it takes a lot of tension. What's gonna happen is if you relax your hand and start flowing, what's gonna happen is you're gonna let it drop and feel the relaxation and the momentum, and you wanna go with it. So by having these 3 fingers off, it a lot of times releases a lot of tension because you don't have a lot to squeeze. You don't have 3 fingers. So now if I relax here, I start timing this. Even on the backhand, what I'll do is have 3 fingers off in the bottom hand, my right hand, and then I'll put 3 fingers on the top grip, but release the bottom 2. And what I'm looking for is that sensation of feeling the racket drop, and it's just relaxing. So I'm feeling the racket drop and rotating the hips, even with the one-handed backhand, feeling the racket drop and syncing it up. So it's really important that you sync these 2 things up without tension. Because if you're sitting here and you're grabbing the racket, squeezing it tight, trying to muscle the ball and be strong to hit it hard, what's gonna happen is, yeah, you can drop the racket here, but you don't get the added free acceleration from gravity. And then, yeah, you could create a lot of racket speed here, but then the hand is gonna be locked. You're gonna create more tension. Tension means stiffness. Stiffness means slow, and that's not what we want. We want massive racket head acceleration, whether it be a forehand or backhand. So make sure you're going out doing this drills to make sure you have your body working, and then second, that you can relax to let the racket naturally drop. Just if I relax here, naturally drops, and sync my uncoiling with that drop. With that drop. And they'll add to you having more massive acceleration and power that you can use when you go out to your match. Like I said, if you want to learn more about the racket face, go check out this video here because it's going to show you exactly what you need to do to start controlling your racket face to use this body rotation and massive amounts of free racket acceleration and directing it where you want without having to muscle the ball, which means you're going to be more consistent and it's not going to be so tiring for you. You're going to be able to stay out there longer hitting bigger shots, whether it be a forehand or backhand.